Next on Investigative Report. Dylan Mulvaney, the man who would be queen. One-time Broadway actor Dylan Mulvaney, born December of 1996 as a boy, would manage to provoke more gender controversy than anyone else in America. 3 years after Dylan's Broadway stint in the Book of Mormon, he would come out as a transgender woman. On December 16, 2022, Mulvaney would undergo facial surgery to change the shape of his face to appear more feminine, which would complement his 50s style of dress. Mulvaney's transitioning fame would take him from an audience with the President of the United States to endorsement deals with Bud Light, Nike, and Oil of Olay. These lucrative endorsement deals would drive the heir of musicians, actors, and news personalities, as well as men and women on both sides of the aisle, who would challenge the legality of honoring a man for mimicking a woman. And now, Dylan Mulvaney, the man who would be queen. Dylan Mulvaney, a Tik Tok influencer with a net worth north of $1 million, has recently caused an uproar in the conservative community for what they feel is the hijacking of their favorite brand of beer. But Dylan's controversy wouldn't end with simply angering the working class man. On the other side of the gender spectrum, feminists began to develop tensions over Dylan being made the sponsor for Zenzi leggings and a late bra workout clothing. They perceive that as men perceive the beer as their purview to do it as they would. Adding more controversy to a woman's sphere of products was the decision to add Dylan to Ultra Beauty's podcast with David Lopez. This broadcast immediately led to calls to boycott the cosmetics firm altogether. Now, critics of that particular program called Mulvaney misogynistic for appropriating womanhood. So women started to see Mulvaney just like blacks saw whites using blackface. And likewise, a post about Tampax feminine hygiene products from Dylan left some viewers shocked and confused. One post replied, "Is this a joke?" Dylan is frequently bashed for referring to the female vagina as a Barbie pouch. But the Tampax endorsement was not the commercial endorsement that angered millions as much as this one here.
Hi! Impressive carrying skills, right? I got some Bud Lights for us. So, I kept hearing about this thing called March Madness, and I thought we were all just having a hectic month, but it turns out it has something to do with sports. And I'm not sure exactly which sport, but either way it's a cause to celebrate. This month I celebrated my day 365 of womanhood, and Bud Light sent me possibly the best gift ever, a can with my face on it. Check out my Instagram story to see how you can enjoy March Madness with Bud Light and maybe win some money too. Love ya! Cheers! Go team! Whatever team you love, I love too. Okay.
But one would wonder why it was that the world never really heard of Dylan before the Bud Light controversy. I mean, it's not as if he hadn't had sponsors other than Nike and Bud Light. Just for clarification, Dylan's endorsement was Aritzia, CeraVe, Crest, House Labs, Instacart, K18 Hair, Kate Spade, Kind Snacks, KitchenAid, O. Henriksen, Rent the Runway, and Ulta Beauty, with more and more companies lining up for his business each day. Now, they do this because he is a highly controversial figure and not because he isn't. It would appear these days that whatever Dylan promotes eventually becomes a controversy that draws the desired attention to the product being promoted. This is why I firmly believe that Bud Light's ad was deliberate. It was not a mistake. A deliberate, calculated, not a mistake, as many would believe, based on Dylan's sexual orientation. They knew who did this, that a certain aim was going to be achieved. And the controversy over people's sexual bents is not a recent U.S. phenomenon. You see, George Santayana, in The Life of Reason, once said, Those who could not remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Transgenderism's upheaval didn't just appear on the horizon just because Mulvaney decided to do the TikTok series, Days of Girlhood. Transgenderism has existed and caused controversy since the early 1950s in America. The first man to transition to womanhood in America was born in the Bronx, New York in 1926. After serving a stint in the U.S. military, to which he had been drafted, he decided to change his sex to reflect what he believed was his natural bent since childhood. Now, back then, even talking about doing such a surgery or acting in the fashion that he did was considered taboo. When he transitioned in the year 1952, he made front page news in just about every newspaper and magazine there was. His name before the transition was George Jorgensen Jr., and after the surgery, he was referred to as Christine Jorgensen. George Jorgensen Jr. gained international celebrity and notoriety overnight, similar to Mulvaney, but his would be different. He was considered the first widely known person to undergo a successful sex reassignment surgery. Now, Jorgensen would go on to get lucrative speaking and commercial deals that would leave him with a net worth of $1.5 million on the day of his death. Now, this entire story that I'll compare with Jorgensen and Mulvaney will mirror the exact. Jorgensen, like Mulvaney, saw himself as a frail, towel-headed, introverted little boy who ran from fistfights and rough and tumble games. In Mulvaney's youth, he strays away from this stuff as well. Now, similar to Mulvaney's career, Christine Jorgensen had a successful stint as an actress, singer, and recording artist. Jorgensen, unlike Mulvaney, dated several men within his lifetime and even was rumored to have dated Joe DiMaggio, the famous baseball legend. Now, as I said before, Jorgensen's career has actually mirrored Mulvaney's career, but Jorgensen was first. In a minute, we will show you a clip of Jorgensen after his transition, and you will see a similarity to the way Mulvaney is mimicking his style of dress in very expensive clothing, lucrative deals, and the hogging of the public limelight. It is my assertion that when COVID shut down Broadway, leaving Mulvaney and many of his actor friends out of work, he was sent back home to live with his parents. Now, it was there that he received a spark of inspiration. You talk about a young man who was really disheveled about his career coming to an abrupt halt. Now, I don't know whether he studied Jorgensen's journey in the 1950s to womanhood, but you can see in every way, down to the classic 50s style of dress in Dylan, is Jorgensen's eerie rebirth. Here is a short clip of George Jorgensen after he returned to the United States following a sex change operation in the country of Denmark.
A 26-year-old ex-GI arrives home from Denmark where doctors converted him into a woman. 2 years ago, the name was George Jorgensen. Today, it's Christine.
Have you been offered a movie contract?
Yes, but I haven't accepted it.
Do you have any plans regarding the theater?
No, I don't think so.
Are you going to go on with your photography?
I hope so, yes.
I see. Well, thank you very much.
I don't have any plans at the moment, and I thank you all for coming, but I think it's too much. Fine, thank you very much.
Christine Jorgensen, as she came to be known, lived from May 3rd of 1926 to May 3rd, 1989, and in appearance carried himself in the same style that is seen in Dylan Mulvaney today. I believe that Dylan wanted to be famous ever since he was a little boy as he clawed his way up from school plays to Broadway acting. Once Dylan found an old, untapped niche that would give him immediate global fame, there would be no turning around for the TikTok influencer. So upwards to the point that he put on a dress and makeup and became a woman, nobody really heard about him on a global scale. Now, in this type of public spectacle, Dylan can expect to be rewarded to his last day, just as Christine Jorgensen did until his dying day. Now, a year before Jorgensen's death, he was interviewed as an older woman on the television show Our Magazine.
George Jorgensen was a GI, among other things, who left New York for Denmark in 1950, where he underwent a series of operations. 2 years later, Christine emerged, and on December 1st, 1952, the story was broken by the New York Daily News. Society found it difficult to accept this young man's decision then, but since that time, Christine Jorgensen has enjoyed success in her careers, her personal life, and her decision. Today, she's here with a look back and a look forward. Please welcome performer lecturer Christine Jorgensen. A lot of water under the bridge, and I suppose over the bridge at times.
Right. In fact, I wrote to a friend of mine, High Gardner in Florida, and I said, remember the cigarette ad, you've come a long way, baby? And he said, send a note back. He said, you still got a long way to go.
Yeah, well,
Forgive my throat because I've had the flu, hasn't everybody?
Everybody seems to, and
Yeah.
it seems to hang on and on and on. But it makes you sound very good, I must say.
Well, I sound more like Tallulah than Tallulah did, you know. And I do that in my act, of course, Tallulah Bankhead.
My first question to you was, have you, and it's funny you should mention High Gardner's response, have you finally achieved full acceptance?
Oh, I don't know whether things would be full acceptance with the intelligentsia, of course, on the educational level of colleges and so forth. Yes, in John Q. Public, I'm not so sure. Sometimes people are still believing that little boys should have blue booties and little girls should have pink booties. As you can see, we're getting into this excitement about abortion and all those things. At the present time, even
Yes.
with our president. And so a lot of things are not as accepted as they're better now, but they're not fully accepted.
Truthfully, if we strip away the media attention that revolved around Christine Jorgensen, as well as Dylan Mulvaney, there would still be a larger issue with the companies whose products these figures promote. For you see, as consumers, we're all being played against one another and played as a fool in the world of advertising and in the world of politics. Stick with me. And despite the influencer's income, Mulvaney is not as important to the consumer psyche as much as the advertisers manipulating us to believe that gender is the difference to fomenting hate from one group to another. I am a great study of advertising since the advertising firm of Volney Palmer in Philadelphia circa 1841. So if you think advertising is a recent concern, it is not. You see, I've been on both radio, TV alike. And I know that it is the job of those advertisers to get you to accept one of 7 styles of campaigns. Now, find the small to middle manager at Bud Light who greenlighted Dylan's advertising campaign, and you will find a person who knew full well who and what they were advertising to. Advertising is no accident. As a matter of fact, the outcome of advertising is no accident. They anticipate that before they cast the first commercial. Now, in the case of Dylan Mulvaney, this was achieved through a mix of what is referred to as bandwagon and testimonial advertising, those two particular campaigns. Either way, the advertiser expects to achieve new followers while absorbing the downside of offending a few million old customers. So they figured they could take a hit, mainly because the customers who do rebel ultimately always come back. The advertisers knew that they would lose customers on the conservative side, but gain customers on the liberal side that would step in to rebel against the conservative views of Mulvaney. They knew that. And you see a lot of people who are Democrats now buying the beer. Additionally, they anticipated that so much press would be generated over the event that their product would achieve worldwide free advertising. All advertising, or all news, good or bad, is news. Advertising, I might add, that after the dust settles, would bring them new customers that they never heard of before concerning Mulvaney. So then, it was settled. Mulvaney would single-handedly bring a new generation of drinkers to Bud Light to replace those that had already drifted over to more robust draft beers. Today, advertising is a more subtle thing. But in its roots, advertising has always pitted one group against another to make one side mad enough to own a product that they would not have cared about before. And as I told you before, advertising existed in America since 1841. So what style do you think advertising would have existed back then? And this type of advertising, which saw its heyday during the segregated America and would peak during women's liberation, is officially referred to as name-calling advertising. Remember this. Name-calling advertising is a form of argument in which insulting or demeaning labels are directed at an individual or group. So back then in that climate, you had plenty to direct your anger towards. or feeling of I am better. And name calling was used heavily in ads such as Uncle Remus. Uncle Remus's syrup had always featured an older black buffoonish man who canned his own syrup as his only job. Now, he didn't even own a syrup company. Other syrup companies that portrayed Caucasian logos, such as Uncle John Syrup, portrayed him as an educated, kindly older gentleman, a far cry from Uncle Remus' ad. But those particular ads existed to make sales, just like they do today. And then there were other items such as Pickaninny Freeze, going directly for slave names as a laughingstock to push their products based upon one group's disdain for the other. This type of advertising will continue through the early 60s and 70s during the women's liberation movement, in which advertisers would use men as laughingstocks and buffoons in order to get women to buy their products. Virginia Slim's brand decided to go with this buffoonish male campaign with the ad, "Women are biologically superior to men." These magazine ads would run during the height of women's liberation through the 1980s. This Wonder Woman style ad was the most egregious towards men. This complete misandrous ad reads, and I quote, "We made Virginia Slims especially for women because they are biologically superior to men." That's right, superior. Women are more resistant to starvation, fatigue, exposure, shock, and illness than men are. Women have 2 X chromosomes in their sex cells, while men have only X chromosome and a Y chromosome, which some experts consider to be the inferior chromosome. They are also less inclined than men to congenital baldness, albinism of the eyes, improperly developed sweat glands, color blindness of the red and green type, day blindness, defective hair follicles, defective iris, defective tooth enamel, double eyelashes, skin cysts, short-sightedness, night blindness, nomadism, retinal detachment, and white occipital locks of hair. In view of these and other facts, the makers of Virginia Slims feel it is highly inappropriate that women continue to use the fat, stubby cigarettes designed for men. Now, the funny thing about this is that Virginia Slims is owned by Marlboro Company. And these ads would appear monthly throughout women's magazines and would be copied into other products like Secret Antiperspirant with the slogan, "Strong enough for a man, but made for a woman." And then there are some products that were originally designed for women that were repackaged for men, such as the iconic Marlboro cigarettes brand. What women failed to realize in their zeal to believe these advertisers was that these were the same companies that had catered against them for over 100 years straight. If an advertiser feels that you have an opposing enemy, they will use your feelings towards that enemy to market that product back to you. And during the women's liberation campaign, women had a great disdain for men. This was a fertile ground for advertisers to jump in and react. One of the greatest advertising campaigns with the cigarette manufacturers began after they realized that they were catering to just one half of their potential audience, and that audience was men. At that point, one slick marketing campaigner decided to market cigarettes to women. Now, anybody could smoke, but it was not in the style for women to smoke out in public then. This brings us to Bud Light's advertising campaign, in which Vice President of Advertising, Alyssa Heinerscheid, or an underling under her, approved that ad that Bud Light CEO would make an apology for after it blew up in their faces. So somebody under you makes a mistake, the CEO always apologizes, but it doesn't seem genuine. On March 30th, just a couple of weeks prior to the Dylan Mulvaney ad, Alyssa Heinerscheid can be heard in an interview with the podcast Make Yourself at Home, saying remarks that echoed old-time name-calling for the male drinkers that had largely built the brand similar to cigarette manufacturers during the 1970s. In effect, she was shooting herself in the foot. In that interview, Alyssa Heinerscheid noted that her mandate was to help Bud Light in attracting young drinkers, before explaining that inclusivity to the brand means shifting the tone. It means having a campaign that truly is inclusive and feeling lighter and brighter and different, and appealing to women and to men. Now, she neglected to say that when she was in college, she did the same fratty type of promotion of beer amongst her friends that she was downgrading. Now note, her bias in placing women before men in that last statement, although males' purchases in dollars primarily built that brand. Now similarly, when Nike used Dylan to highlight a historically female garment with men, would women around the world get mad enough to burn their proverbial Nike bras? See, it would appear that Dylan Mulvaney had managed to achieve two dynamically opposing views in advertising, and yet profit from both. So it doesn't matter whether you hate him or you like it, he's still going to profit. The first to be loved by her over 11 million followers on TikTok, and the second to be despised by untold millions of Bud Light patrons, female Nike apparel purchasers, and olive oil users, and the like of other products. In the case of the beer giant, Bud Light's cans featuring Dylan Mulvaney were reportedly custom made to celebrate the transgender influencer's one-year transition. Now, the company had no intentions, they say, of selling them to the general public, but the buzz around the campaign made people take issue with that same product nevertheless. While the influencer made waves in advertising spaces, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, as well as conservative groups across the nation, were pushing for legislation that would ban transgender medical treatments for minors, including puberty blockers and sex reassignment surgeries. Now, that is their job. Now, although Mulvaney says he speaks for the trans and LGBTQ plus community, none of this has seemed to appear to affect the social media influencer who is expected to rake in over $1 million in sponsorship fees for this one particular year. Here's a video of Dylan on OraQuick ad. Now, OraQuick is a product that gives its users HIV results through rapid in-home testing.
Your status? Well, if you haven't gotten tested in the last 6 months, check out OraQuick. It's the only at-home kit out there. The same quick and easy test healthcare providers use, and you find out your results in as little as 20 minutes. Get yours now at your local pharmacy or online at oraquick.com.
Hi, Andy. Hi, honey. What's the tea? What's the sitch? Have you heard about OraQuick? Duh. Can you get it online? Yeah. And you see that it works. And it's totally safe. That's right. And you've done it before. For sure. It's been around for years. Girl, like 9 whole years. It's really great and I've done it. How haven't you? Okay, I'll get it.
And quick, oh so easy 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 and.
I was just picking up OraQuick. How'd you know?
That's what I was doing.
TikTok posts featuring Mulvaney in tight shorts with a noticeable growing bulge angered conservative Senator Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee. And she targeted a 25-year-old influencer. She believed that it was her job to go after him. Now, that was not an accident, it was purposeful. As I told you before, advertisers and politicians are alike. In a tweet she shared, the Republican lawmaker embedded this particular Mulvaney TikTok video and wrote, Dylan Mulvaney, Joe Biden, and radical left-wing lunatics want to make this absurdity normal. Now notice how in that one quote, she too used the popular advertising tool of name-calling. But I say again, we as consumers or the electorate are being made the fool. Now let me explain. Politicians for the most part are like large corporations in that they have to rake in major funding to get reelected. Now, there's something to get elected, but then there's something different to get reelected. And you want to get reelected by your major party. Just like Mulvaney, he's targeting an audience. Now, Senator Marsha Blackburn, the top raker herself, spent a record $16,572,477 on her 2016 election campaign to the Senate. Now, whether you sell beer or a politician, it is still a campaign. That whopping figure she raised in tax-free dollars is enough to purchase 1 million 274,807 Bud Light individual beer cans. On a much broader scale of bandwagon advertising, Joe Biden inviting Mulvaney to the White House and expecting to capitalize off of a controversy seeks to outspend more than the $1 billion he used on his first election campaign to the White House. Now, this record amount for an elected official is enough to buy every American citizen one six-pack of Bud Light beer with some pocket change left to spare for the commander-in-chief. So whether you're selling Bud Light, whether you're selling the presidency, it takes a large audience to get there. If controversy causes it, they will accept it. As I said a minute ago, advertising works especially if you are trying to raise the cockles of the group you cater to in order to benefit as a company or a senator. Now don't fool yourself for a minute. This is not a news story in defense of Dylan Mulvaney's actions, for he is not a victim in all of this, nor does this channel promote Dylan Mulvaney. The problem is not with Mr. Mulvaney as much as it is with us, the U.S. public, for you see, it is we who invented Dylan Mulvaney's kind, just as we will the group who will succeed him in the future. Now these things are all homegrown in America. We start these things and then we try to stop them. Now how do we do this, you may say? America is a hangover with Martin Luther King's concerns during the Civil Rights Movement, which were galvanized following his death, his tragic death. Now the aftermath of that event triggered in the psyche of this nation a need to never be late again to protect marginally weak groups, no matter how nonsensical they may be. So a lot of these groups are being compared to black struggle up to the Civil Rights Movement. Now, in a brief snapshot of that time period, we gain the belief of never wanting to be on the wrong side of history again. So just like Mulvaney, people don't want to be on the wrong side of history. Today, society sees Dylan's group as marginalized persons needing our protection, similar to homosexual men who were marginalized during the AIDS crisis of 1981. So remember, after King's assassination, any group after that was seen as marginalized, needed help. And when the epidemic began in the United States, President Ronald Reagan chose not to stand on the side of those men due to their sexual orientation. Now he would do this until the CDC explained to him that straight people were also in peril now because the disease was beginning to spread. Now religious leaders at the time gleefully believed that Americans would see these men as an abomination and would hopefully shun them as an entire community. Now, this would come back to bite both of them. See, those two beliefs would come back to haunt both entities as the infected men triggered the Martin Luther King syndrome and galvanized American citizens to care about them based upon two factors. Now, the same thing will occur in the future with Mr. Mulvaney. The first was that each family in this country either had someone who was gay or was at least a couple of persons separate from someone who was infected. Just like the COVID. If somebody in your family got COVID, you felt that. Maybe not before. Now, 42 years after that crisis until today, Dylan would benefit from the same Martin Luther King syndrome, drawing one side of America to hate him and the other side to defend him based upon the fact that someone either has someone in their family or friend who is in the transgender community. So, as long as the Martin Luther King effect works, we will continue to invent this type of people. So you see, it is a fallacy to say that this group represents 1% of America, when politicians and advertisers know full well that each person who is transgender has an extended family member of 12 persons and many more friends. Now real quick, that 1% number can change to 18% of the electorate populate overnight for any election campaign or an ad purchase. Look at the recent COVID crisis, as I said before. No one really understood it until you had someone either infect in your family or a death in the family from it. That crisis sparked the Martin Luther King syndrome for a marginalized group of sufferers. So everybody didn't get COVID, but a group of people did get COVID. So we felt that until that was respected. Now, other events that would benefit from the Martin Luther King syndrome and a perception of standing on the wrong side of history will be the normalization of abortion on demand, the legalization of the same-sex marriage, and many other bankable issues. So any of these issues that you see come up on the news any day of the week, those are bankable issues. If somebody's for it, somebody is against it. So yes, we invented Dylan Mulvaney, the man who would become queen of all women, who would represent them whether they wanted him to or not. We invented it when we tried to get girls into boys' sports like football, when we moved women rapidly into an equal society, and when we applauded women for being masculine and males for being feminine. We invented him. Reminiscent of Reagan's AIDS crisis in 1981, the only thing that hardens the heart against the opposition of perceived marginalized groups is if religious, political, or news agencies piled onto the targeted victim. In doing this, they ensure that eventually what America thought was horrible will soon become a respected norm. So we're sort of like a very rebellious country. If you want us to get mad at something and accept it, all you have to do is tell us we shouldn't do it. For example, Vice President Gore's wife, Tipper Gore, came out in opposition to rap music in 1985. Now, since she was seen as a high figure in government, this triggered the Martin Luther King syndrome immediately and caused rap music to become stronger than ever before. To date, rap music is a couple of years short of half a century and based merely on the rebellion of government leadership. And the same government leadership that would say that young boys should not have their pants down. May be true, but it was government opinion. Now, mere civilization of that rap era is males wearing their pants down, sagging, as I said before. This trend too galvanized a nation to rebel, allowing temporary fad to last just as long. But in agreeing with every marginalized event, we ignore the dangers to that group we pretend to ally ourselves with, if only temporarily. Just as with sagging pants, a transgender person is a trending movement, but one with great consequences. So a lot of kids are trending towards transgender today. But they don't know suicide rates for transgender individuals by the Center for Disease Control indicate that 82% of transgender individuals have considered killing themselves and 40% have attempted suicide. In fact, suicide is the second leading cause of death among young people aged 10 to 24 who are LGBTQ plus community. And in the trans community, the murder rate is higher than any other, with 375 trans people being murdered alone in the year 2021. Currently, governments on the local and state levels are concerned with trans children using mixed bathrooms. Now, such was a concern for one case determined in the court of Chief Judge Pamela L. Brooks of Loudoun County. Now, the court concluded that a transgender teenager in Loudoun County School District sexually assaulted a female student in the school's bathroom. Now, this comes in direct contrast to the opinion that even the President of the United States, Joe Biden, had about allowing transgender youth to use female bathrooms. In a higher case this year, it has been concluded that trans male Isla Bryson, who was sent to a women's prison, was found guilty of raping 2 women, a move which caused him to be moved to a men's prison. Now, here's a short clip of James O'Keefe, if you remember, the founder of Project Veritas, confronting Dylan Mulvaney about that exact same issue of a transgender man raping a cis woman.
I'm James O'Keefe with OMG News outside the Four Seasons Hotel in Beverly Hills. Dylan Mulvaney is inside the women's restroom right now, so I'm going to ask him for comment about our story regarding women being raped in prison by men claiming to be transgender. Here we go. Dylan, this is James O'Keefe, OMG. Women are being raped in a prison in Washington State by men claiming to be transgender. There's footage of them talking about the rape. Do you have a comment on the story here of the women being raped by the men claiming to be transgender? James O'Keefe, OMG News. What do you think about the women who are being raped by the men who are transgender? Do you have a comment about that?
Please don't come in the elevator.
What do you think about, what is your comment to the women who are being raped by men claiming to be transgender, Dylan? So we're here with Dylan here. Haven't had much Bud Light recently, but we're very interested in the women's prison. Dylan? Okay. She did go into she went into the women's restroom.
Incidents like these, as well as transgender women, Audrey Hill's recent attack on a Covenant Christian school in Nashville, helped galvanize a backlash against the transgender community that Martin Luther King syndrome could never fix. The amazing thing about the Martin Luther King syndrome is that if you go overboard and rebel against a group that is supporting you, that group pulls its support from you. And in the black community, a lot of group support has been pulled away, especially at the Black Lives Matter movement and the riots that occurred since then. As I said earlier, none of these incidents would be sanctioned without the tacit support of one political party over the other. One side of the aisle will promote the issue to gain new followers, just as Bud Light did, while the other side is left to demonize the behavior to gain additional constituents, similar to Bud Light's advertising. So it matters not who is in the center of the campaign. Both sides always see the center as something different. So either way, name-calling and bandwagon advertisers bring just about as much money to politics as it does to private enterprise. Here now is a short clip of Dylan at the White House interviewing the president to boost his ratings in that community and Dylan's followers online about trans issues.
And it feels like Republicans have turned trans and non-binary people into this thing to blame society's downfall on in some ways. And this narrative is not only dangerous to our mental health, but also our physical safety. And particularly trans women of color are being murdered at an alarming rate.
More than any other group of people.
Thank you. How can Democratic leaders be more effective in advocating for us trans people in our families, in our lives, and our opportunities?
I'm not being facetious when I say this, being seen with people like you. No, I mean it. I genuinely mean it. People fear what they don't know. They fear what they don't know. And when people realize, individuals realize, oh, this is what they're telling me to be frightened of, this is the problem, people change their minds. People are just don't know enough to know. And it's not because of intellectual incapability, it's just lack of exposure. And I think that it's really important that we continue to speak out about the basic fundamental rights of all human beings. And the idea that what's going on, in some states, I won't get into the politics of it, but in some states, it's outrageous, and I think it's immoral. The trans part's not immoral.
Thank you.
Recently, in a twist of fate, Donald Trump's son came out in defense of Bud Light, asking boycotters to knock it off. He did this because he said that Anheuser-Busch has donated heavily in the past to conservative political campaigns. So, imagine that. The people who boycott should knock it off because it's based upon money, not upon principle. It would seem in this case that your conservative bona fides may be set aside to suit your political monetary gains. Odd though, for a group who has fought tooth and nail about preventing surgeries done to young people determined as genital mutilation. Now, it is not my concern to fight for either side. Now, even in the trans movement, you have those who regret these surgeries and some other speakers on how their sex drive and sense of feeling down there was taken away. So in every case, these surgeries do not turn out well, and down the road, they turn out even less than that. With all the notoriety that Dylan has to date, he is just to commit to this form of bottom surgery. And bottom surgery is the changing of your gender to the gender you want to achieve. Dylan's only surgeries to date include a hairline advancement, a brow bone shave, a rhinoplasty, minor cheek enhancements, a little lip lift, a jaw shave, a chin reduction, and a tracheal shave as seen here in a consult with his own doctor.
Here in Beverly Hills, and we're talking FFS surgery. Perfect. What is FFS?
FFS is facial feminization surgery. So we want to take any so-called male characteristics or any hard features on your face, and we want to soften them.
Okay, where can you do that on the face?
So in your case, every individual is different. So we want to individualize or tailor the treatment plan according to what we see.
Yes.
And what the individual wants.
It is what I want, everyone. Remember that.
So in your case, I think you wanted to approach the brow So we want to soften this area.
Yep.
Make it softer. Maybe soften the nose a little bit. Okay. Your jaw is a little bit angular and the chin is a little bit angular too. So we're going to soften those features. Dylan is still going to be Dylan.
Yes! Just a little bit
A
more feminine version.
Softer version, a sister version of yourself.
A sister version. I can't wait. Thank you so much. I feel like I'm walking on air right now. I'm so happy. I feel so much gender euphoria. And I'm not nervous about the anesthesia. I'm not nervous about the surgery. I'm only nervous that I will...
But I imagine that Dylan, just like many other considering gender reassignment surgery, might want to think long and hard. Gender reassignment surgery comes with its risk and complications, of which include, but are not limited to, bleeding, infection, poor healing of incisions, hematoma, nerve injury, failure of the transplanted tissue to survive, unsightly scars, exposure to prosthesis, including to the urinary tract, abnormal connections between the urethra and the skin, painful intercourse, and anesthesia risk, which top all surgeries. It's very risky. Now, in truth, 55% of trans women who have bottom surgery are in so much pain they need medical care years down the road. And up to 2/3 struggle to use the toilet or have sex. So it is not a normal process to try to change from one gender to the next and expect the same outcome as that particular gender. Now, a Daily Mail article reveals some previously unheard of statistics. Although gender reassignment surgery starts at around $25,000, there are no guarantees. Now, I don't know too many people who are going to something for $25,000 without some form of guarantee. It is quite clear from the most up-to-date studies that vaginoplasty and other genital surgeries don't work in the way that people hope they will. And this is from Stella O'Malley, who is a psychotherapist and director of the campaign group GenSpect. Now, odd that somebody at the top will be sounding the alarm. The reason why there are so many problems is because this is an incredibly difficult surgery, she said. Young, vulnerable people need to know about the challenges they will face post-surgery, but few of them do. As I said before, you have a lot of young people today going into this type of transgenderism because their friend did it as a fad movement, pulling your pants down, rap music. In recent years, an increasing number of detransitioners, those who regret their decision to transition and later reverse it, has spoken out about the medical side effects of the procedures that they were not previously made aware of. So in anything you do, they always say the glitz and the glam of it, but not the actual pain that comes after it or the psychological trauma. And one such detransitioner by the name of Shapeshifter, and also YouTube contributor, claimed he regretted this mastectomy and vaginoplasty after they led to fistula and other painful consequences. And he says he realized he was simply a gay man who liked showing his feminine side and began to detransition. Looking back to the mirror of a generation of identity politics, coupled with explosive virtue signaling, we have succeeded at separating ourselves as a nation. A separation that rivals that of the time Martin Luther King was alive. Today we reflect on what Martin Luther King spoke of concerning the vast denominations of churches based on race makeup, when he spoke these words, and I quote, he said, 11 o'clock on Sunday morning is one of the most segregated hours in Christian America, end quote. Now what Mr. King meant was that even at a time when we should have been most united under one opinion, we were totally divided as a nation. And like I said, now as then, if you want to really make a movement, the first thing you need to do is divide people. Yes, advertising plays a part in that division, and political parties, in order to keep their grip on power by parroting their meanest constituents' feelings. But we too have to accept some blame. At one time when post-racial America was healing itself, its advertisers responded in kind. Now, if you have a certain opinion in America, usually advertisers will go with that opinion. On the other side, with politics, they will give you your opinion. Let's take, for example, the classic Coca-Cola television ad of the 1970s in which Coke gathered teens from each country all around the world with a bottle of Coke to sing, "I like to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony." Remember this ad?
Buy the world a home and furnish
Coca-Cola, the company who once made that beautiful commercial, has gathered under the umbrella of social justice warriors and presenting one particular new ad about women who drive in Saudi Arabia. Now they're doing this to American consuming women to try to get them to buy soda. Now women driving in the kingdom for the first time with government approval is not as important as what drives Coca-Cola purchases. Now as we close, I guess things change, but they remain the same. Find someone, some group, or government entity to hate, and I'll find your corporation or a government official that is getting rich, dividing us against ourselves. For Investigative Report, this is Charles Rivers. Thank you for watching.